You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-hosts, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. Really excited to introduce a friend and a colleague of mine, Dr. Ira Gordon. Dr. Ira Gordon is a veterinary radiation oncologist, researcher, and entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience improving the veterinary profession and animal health. He currently serves as a Chief Experience Officer of Vetcelerator. Dr. Gordon is also a co-founder of the Veterinary Angel Network for Entrepreneurs, VANE, which connects investors with innovative veterinary companies. Previously, Dr. Gordon owned the Oncology Service, a practice that specializes in treating pets with cancer. He also served as a medical director and director of innovation for Ethos Veterinary Health, a network of veterinary hospitals, and co-founded VetPrep, VetTech Prep, an online platform that provides study resources for veterinary students and technicians. Ira, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. So many things you've done in your career. What is Vetcelerator? Tell everybody about it.
Vetcelerator is what we refer to as a veterinary services organization, essentially meaning that we support mostly independent small practices with all of their operational needs. The way I think about it is I used to own a group of oncology practices, as you just mentioned, and we eventually got really tired of doing a lot of the things that you have to do to operate a veterinary practice, from managing HR and recruiting, IT, operations, finance, you name it. We sold our practices to a corporate consolidator group that gave us resources in all those areas. So now when we needed to change something on our website, there was somebody to do that for us. When we needed to hire a vet or a technician, there was a recruiting team to go out looking for those folks for us. And at Vetcelerator, we do all of those same things for clinics, but we do it for independent clinics. And the thing that makes us different is that we don't take any ownership in those clinics. We just take a fee for providing those services.
That's really cool. I'm looking at the services that you guys are providing, and that's essentially departments of Consolidator. That's really what it is. And it was really cool. I was actually last week, I was in one of our practice in Danville, and I was talking to the seller. And he was saying that, all these resources, when he was a general practitioner, he maybe had ideas around all of these areas, but you just don't have the time. So you can't really invest into developing that, or you would never be able to hire a robust team that has deep expertise in all of those areas. But I'm going to throw you a curveball just because you're a friend right away. So consolidation is the business of change management. It's not business of providing pet care, I think. Like, this is my conclusion so far. It's a business of change management. Doing change management in the practices that you own is very difficult. How is it doing change management in the practices that you don't own and you're a consultant?
Well, this is exactly hits right at the heart of one of the biggest challenges that I think we face at Vetcelerator, but it's also one of the things that is really neat about our model. When we think about providing operational support to practices, when we sold our practices, we had a great regional VP of operations, but ultimately we felt like we worked for him, right? He was the representative of the company, and changes that he wanted to make, it was on us to then try to implement. But in our model, we work for the practices, right? And so we can make suggestions or recommendations about changes that we think they should make, but ultimately we lean on them to tell us what they think is right and best for their clinic. And if there's a change we think they should make because it's better for their business, but they don't think is right for them personally or for their clientele or for their staff, they just say no.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. Ira, so I want to back up a little bit. How did Vetcelerator start, and how did you get involved?
So Vetcelerator actually has a pretty surprising origin story, which is that prior to my involvement, the co-founders developed a franchise business of veterinary clinics that were called Easy Vets. And what I never really thought about, because I really never had a big interest in franchises, was what a franchisor, or a person that sells franchises, actually is, which is essentially somebody that provides operational support and services to independently owned businesses. And when I started to become involved, I started to realize that they had built a pretty neat network of services and support for these independent veterinary franchises that other independent clinics really could benefit from. And I joined with the vision that these services could help not only the franchises that they were supporting, but really any independent veterinary clinic that wanted to receive those services. And so that coincided with the emergence or sort of development of Vetcelerator as a veterinary services organization.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I guess the next question is, you guys have been doing this for a little while now. When did you actually kind of commence operations as Vetcelerator?
About a year ago is when we first started supporting non-franchises.
Yeah, so a little while ago, and interesting dynamics and market changes, with the slowing down of consolidation and independence, maybe looking a little bit stronger than they have in the past. What have you learned in the last year? And what's it like to kind of provide these services to a wide array of independents?
We've learned a lot. We've learned that what every clinic needs is a little bit different, of course. We have shifted some of our beliefs and theses as we've learned about this. When we first started, we thought that it would be really important and ideal, for example, for us to have all of the clinics that we work with be on the same practice management software, for example. And we started to find that, like that's a change that's really hard to implement and sometimes can create a lot of unhappiness because migration is difficult. And frankly, not very many clinics love their PIMS. Some are okay with it and some hate it, right? And so for us to be a driving force behind a change like that was actually not providing good value to the clinics that wanted to work with us. Instead, what we now do is we help them if they have problems with their practice management systems. And if they want to make a change, we have a group of systems that we like, that we have customers that are happy with, that we will help make introductions to and help with the transition, and really just try to help solve any problems or needs that they have related to those systems, as opposed to trying to tell them that we have a better idea about something that can work best for their practice.
So you have, and I'll read them out. There's all these departments, as I call them, that you guys provide. So inventory and the inventory process and analysis of cost of goods. Then there's bookkeeping automation and a financial automation, billing, payroll. Then there's recruiting and HR. Then there's website and reputation management. Then there's data analytics. Then there's IT facilities support. Then there's client communication, learning development, business transition, and real estate and construction, which is pretty much all of it. So what are those that you see in the last year, the most popular ones, and then that you get the most traction? Because, and I want to separate the two questions, because one of them is there's people that they feel that they have a problem in some area, but then there's actually true problem that they have, and sometimes it's not the same thing. So what do you find is the excitement, and when people find you is about, and where do you find the most traction on the things that you can help them with?
Not surprisingly, one of the things that is most popular and that drives a lot of interest in what we do are our recruiting services. As I'm sure you know, the biggest challenge that most clinics are facing these days is one of recruitment and retention. And so that is oftentimes a driving force behind interest in what we do. We believe that effective recruiting is difficult to differentiate from how people market their practice, because when you post a job listing, the first thing people are going to do is look you up online and find out information about your practice. And so those are probably the two big things that are most popular. And to the extent that we have customers that just love us and rave about us, usually that is not related to those services. Although when we help somebody find a veterinarian right away, certainly they do. Honestly, more often than not, there's only a little bit within our control, right? How quickly those positions get filled, but we can oftentimes take a lot of work off their plate through that process. But the biggest wins that we have are oftentimes these really random things. We have, for example, a clinic that we were working with that the owner had bought an ultrasound a long time ago, spent about $12,000 and never got it. And she's been trying to track down the guy that sold it to her and hasn't. And within a couple of weeks of our head of facilities working on it, we had not only found him, but gotten a commitment to refund all that money to her. We had another example of a clinic that had a really bad flood in their parking lot. And instead of having to deal with it all herself, the vet called us, and we got to work on getting a crew out there to help fix that problem, get some quotes on the repairs that needed to be done, and really kept the clinic up and running while we were sort of taking care of those details. So while those types of needs are not typically why people sign up with us, those sort of unexpected and unanticipated major benefits that have both financial benefit to the practice as well as save them a ton of time tend to be the places where we really shine.
Ira, If you were to look at, the customers that you guys have acquired over the last 12 months and step back and think what does an ideal customer, if we've got a bunch of private practice people that listen to our show, they're always looking for innovative ideas. This is kind of an innovative idea. What you guys are doing is not just outsourcing of IT, but all of these separate things with a bunch of industry experts. And that's why I was super excited to have you on the show. But what does an ideal client look like for you guys?
Thanks for asking, Shawn. I think our ideal clients are typically a relatively small practice, one, two, three doctors. Usually, once practices start to get a lot bigger than that, they start to have more of their own teams that can do more of the things that we do. And so those small practices we can often provide the most value to. I think that we help practices that are looking to grow. Our team's great at marketing and helping practices to do that through bringing in cases as well as through the recruitment function that we were talking about before. We also help a lot of practices where owners are looking to do a little bit less, right? They've gotten to a point in their career where they are not wanting to do as many of the things related to operating their practice and just want a little bit of help. We do find that many of those practices are ones that are really difficult for them to find a buyer for as well, whether that be a associate that's going to come into the practice and potentially buy it, or to look for a consolidator to buy it, because it is oftentimes viewed as too much of a risk for an outside consolidator to buy, for example, a small one doctor practice with a doctor that's sort of nearing end of career. And so what can they do to continue to keep their practice open while decreasing some of their responsibilities? They find that coming to work with us so that we can help on the operational side, allow them to continue to work on the medical things in the practice, while we also hopefully help to recruit some additional staff to support them so they can find that way towards retirement.
That's awesome. So, what do you find in the last year? So, what we are seeing is that consolidators slowing down. Some of them were levered too much. They hit, interest rates hit them. They can't acquire any more practices. The practices drop in value. So, for someone who wasn't retiring next year and just was kind of considering because of all the, the boom and the valuations, those are gone. Clinics are not 18, 20 multiples anymore. Did you see the effect on your business that people are like, okay, I'd rather accelerate what I have. I'll make it a better practice right now instead of rushing into sale. And then you're picking up those people. They were like, okay, I'm hitting the ceiling and I would like to explore. Is that something that you're seeing based on the market?
I don't know that I could attribute the cause and effect between the two. I think we definitely are speaking to and working with a number of practices that I think fit the mold that you just described. And as I'm not sure if they would have been looking towards us in a different sort of economic environment or not. But I think that it makes sense that the two could be related.
And then I guess, what is with so many services that are listed? If someone usually, do people come in with the actual problem, or do you get people that are just like, look, I need to do something with the practice and I just don't feel like where the area is? And what is that, call it a sales process or customer recruiting process looks like?
Yeah, I think we find that there's a lot of practices that are relatively new that find out about what we do and really come to look for our help as they start to build, process operations and do that well. And because of our history building new practices, we actually work with a number of people looking to start from the ground up. And then we work with clinics that are looking to grow and struggling to do so, either because of recruiting and or caseload, as well as folks that are maybe starting to think about transition but need help to sort of build that path to get there. So those are probably our three kind of core customers, if you will.
And since you touched on recruiting a couple times, what is, and of course you don't have to answer it, but what is the silver bullet for you other than the clinics? And what do you have? Is it just the diligence and the discipline of following up? Because it is a full-time job right now looking for candidates. So is that where you just provide the framework and the lead gen and then filtering, or what are those things that you're bringing to these practices that they will listen to this episode and go, I need to call Dr. Gordon?
Yeah, I wish I could tell them all that we have the silver bullet, and if they sign up with us, we'll have all the talent they've been looking for next week. That would be a dishonest representation of what we do in recruiting. We do have an awesome team of 3 people working full-time on recruiting. And one of the things that we found is that, at least for veterinarians, although we help clinics and we do a lot of posting on the major job boards for veterinarians, it is a small minority of the jobs that we fill that actually come from job postings. Instead, most come from the outreach efforts that our recruiting team does with veterinary schools and through places like professional networks to reach out to vets that may be good fits for clinics where they're searching, and try to build those relationships. That's how the majority of our, at least veterinarian positions, get filled. And that just takes a lot of work and time to work on building those relationships. We do find that there is also a lot of value in just having people that are doing the legwork of making those job postings and updating them and keeping track of the applications that are coming in, filtering and screening them, so that somebody that could be seeing patients and generating revenue in the clinic isn't spending their time doing that.
That's super cool. Ira, so a couple of things that I've been thinking about since we've been talking. It's a very interesting kind of concept that you guys are doing. It's like some kind of take on, it's like a reverse consolidator, or I don't know if you guys have a special name to call it. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is, like, if you're working with these different veterinary clinics that are independents, can you somehow kind of like stitch them together and have like a network, or do you have plans for that? And I think that the overarching question that I want to ask is, where do you see Vetcelerator in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? What do you guys want to look like?
I think we would love to sort of grow that network and community. And a recent example of a clinic that was looking to sell some equipment at the same time that a clinic was starting was looking to buy some equipment. And it was pretty neat that we could pair those folks up and create good business opportunity for both sides. And as our network grows, sort of imagine seeing more opportunities like that. I think that we are a little bit unique as a business model, and we sort of find ourselves kind of trapped in between two more common types of businesses in the veterinary space. One would be the consolidator, of course, that's actually buying clinics, which we don't do. And the other would be the GPO, the group purchasing org, that sort of is a group of practices that are sort of working together to do things like get discounts from suppliers, which we do for the practices in our network as well. But we're obviously not as hands-on as a consolidator is. We don't own these clinics. And as I said, we work for them as opposed to the other way around. And compared to something like a GPO, we just have a much deeper level of involvement and support in most of the clinics that we work with than a typical GPO does. And so trying to see that as a model that can potentially support and promote and sustain independent veterinary clinic ownership better as we move into the future is what I hope for.
So I want to build an ad for you.
Let's collaborate on it together.
For the vets that are out there and listening to this episode, what is that one thing if they're thinking they should contact you? Like, what is this? If you're thinking that, you need to hire someone, or if you're thinking that you're spending too much time on X, like, what is that ideal customer who is thinking this should pick up the phone and call you?
I think that ideal customer is the clinic owner that is tired of feeling like they're on their own running their clinic. Everybody else, when they have a problem, calls them, right? But when they have a problem, they don't have anybody to call, right? And so that person that feels like I'm just sort of stuck here on my own. I wish I just had more help with all these things, that might think to themselves, maybe the option for me is to sell my clinic, but I really don't want to do that, right? I still love my clinic and I want to see it sort of, stay the way it is and in my hands. And is there a way for me to get some help? I think that's the clinic that we would love to help.
I think we also add, because it's harder to sell clinics than it was in the last 12 months, it could be the people that wanted to sell because they were excited about the help and maybe continuing on. So I think guys, we did a pretty good job collaborating on that. So call Ira now. What's your phone number, Ira?
And if you call within 10 minutes,
Ivan will give you, I don't know, something.
All right, it was a pleasure. Always happy to see you and to hear the updates, what you're doing in the industry. There's two things that we always ask of all the guests. One is there a book, YouTube, TED Talk, any sort of recommendation to our listeners that you were inspired by recently?
Yes, thanks for asking. There is an author. He's also a lawyer and negotiator. His name's Kwame Christian. And his book, Finding Confidence in Conflict, is great. It's about how to negotiate anything and live your best life. He also does have a podcast called Negotiate Anything, which, of course, talks about negotiation, but talks about all aspects of conflict in life, including parenting. So I really love it. He also has another book that's great called How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. It's just another type of sort of conflict that people worry about, and I find that his approach to thinking about that is really unique.
That sounds fascinating. I have to put it on the list. And then the last question is another guest, another innovator in the veterinary industry that you think we should have on the show.
You guys have talked to so many wonderful people that I thought somebody that would be different and really interesting is Annette Kleiser. She's the CEO of Dallin Animal Health, and what they're doing is incredible. They're trying to develop an effective vaccine for an infectious disease of honeybees, despite the fact that for a long time, insects weren't even believed to have an immune system. And so they're really trying to make something that's incredibly innovative and game-changing for animal health and maybe a different type of animals that we use.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.